I'd like to start the meeting. Okay. Good evening. I'm Alan Edelkind, School Board Representative from Dublin. And I want to thank our in-house and online audience for taking the time from their already busy schedules to attend this important meeting on a single topic that will affect all Conval towns, that being consolidation reconfiguration. This is the second meeting we are holding in this series of meetings on this part of the process. The first one was held on Thursday, January 4th, was for the select boards and town administrators from the towns that are being considered to be the sending towns due to the consolidation reconfiguration recommendation and your vote of approval. This meeting is for the residents of the same four towns in the Conval School District. It's very important to note that there is a separate meeting that is not in this series of meetings that requires your attention to make your voice heard. This is the deliberative session, which will be held on February 6th at Conval High School. This is a meeting where you have the opportunity to discuss, vote on, and possibly change a warrant article that is on the ballot. Don't abdicate your right to be a part of the solution. This is democracy where your vote counts. Voters at the deliberative session decide the final wording on the warrant articles to send to the March elections at the polls. Send on to the March election at the polls. And what is a deliberative session? Also known as the first session, it's the chance for voters to ask questions, debate, or make changes to articles on the warrant before voting in March. At the deliberative session, the warrant is finalized by voters and sent on to the second session, which is the March elections. What is an amendment to the deliberative sessions? At the deliberative session, an amendment is a change to the warrant article made by registered voters at the meeting. Most amendments require a simple majority of the voters at the meeting to pass. Voters must still vote on the overall article, either pass the wording on to the final ballot at the deliberative session or for the final vote at the traditional meetings. Are there amendments that voters can't make? Yes. One of the most important restrictions is that voters can't change the subject matter of a warrant article. For example, if a voter wanted to change the article about buying a police cruiser to buy instead of a fire truck, that wouldn't be allowed. Everything on the warrant has to be posted publicly before the meeting so voters know what topics will come up during the meeting. Among other articles, voters can't change our collective bargaining agreements, such as teachers' contracts, and voters cannot change the default budget. Excuse me. The subject we are gathered here in-house, online and in-house to discuss is a very important one for our district as a whole and for each town in the district. The needs of the entire district reflect the needs of each town individually. Subsequent to the deliberative session, there is a meeting for a vote on the budget and warrant articles that all registered voters can cast their ballot. This meeting is totally focused on consolidation reconfiguration. There will be a presentation on the study, recommendation processes, and alternatives used in this project that will be given by Mike Hoyt, School Board Representative from Bennington. Smile, Mike. That's better. After the presentation, there will be approximately an hour for questions for both our audiences, in-house and online, that will be answered by Mike Hoyt, the school board, or Conval administration as appropriate. Questions from the online audience will be submitted by email to forum@conval.edu, organized and given to Mike to read. We will alternate questions from the in-house and online audience. We allocate 2 minutes for each to state their questions to be fair to others waiting in line, not to cut people off. But we have to be fair to everybody. We ask that the questionnaire step up to the microphone over there to speak. There will be one remote microphone for those who cannot get to the podium. As you all know, it is an important topic that affects all towns in different ways. It is not one town against another, big towns against small towns, as has been suggested by some. It is deciding what is the best educational environment we can cost-effectively provide for our students, our children. Your school board has worked long, hard, and correctly to come up with a recommended approach and have been extremely open and transparent with community involvement and input throughout the entire process. We look out for the best interests of our students and towns. Always remember that what we recommend, we feel is in the best interest of our students and each of our towns. We're your neighbors and we are affected by this, the same as all of you are. Don't forget, we are holding another forum like this one for all towns on Thursday, February 8th at 7:30 p.m. That way all can listen and learn from all sides on this item. We do look forward to a positive and informative interaction. A few things I'd like to finish my opening remarks with. The warrant article to change the Articles of Agreement only changes the number of elementary schools we shall keep open from 8 to 4. It does not say we will close the other 4 schools. The change only gives your elected officials the right to do so. We have allocated over 1 year of intense implementation analysis that will be done using a task force that will be comprised of school board members, Conval administration, and community residents to determine which schools will be closed based on detailed criteria as specified in our RFP, which was our request for proposal, in the following school year. The criteria is multifaceted and will be discussed by Mike from Bennington in his presentation. We as school board take our responsibilities to our children, towns, and residents very seriously. There are 13 of us representing 9 towns in the district. Each of our interests is primarily to the town we represent and then to the district as a whole. These are mostly complementary interests, although there can be times they can be contrary. This is not one of those times, those contrary times. Determining what is best for all of our children led your board to vote 8-2 in the affirmative to accept the Prismatic Services recommendation with the right to modify it as we see necessary through the upcoming analysis year. I'll now turn the meeting over to Mike Hoyt for his presentation. Mike?
Good evening. I want to welcome everyone here tonight to this informational session to discuss the Conval Consolidation Plan. As Alan said, my name is Michael Hoyt, and I'm the school board representative from Bennington. Before I get into the plan, just as a brief background, I came to this position on the school board after working in the Franklin School District for 38 years. During that time, I served as high school teacher, coach, and athletic director for 13 years, as the special ed director for 8 years, and finally as the elementary principal of a preschool through grade 3 school for 17 years. Tonight, I'll be sharing information about why the board has decided to accept the plan that we have before us, how we would be proceeding with that plan if it's accepted, and finally, as Alan said, giving people an opportunity to ask questions both from the people here and online. The first thing is about student population. Our student population has been declining for years, and based on the U.S. government sources, it is projected to keep on a downward trend. This is not unique to Conval or New Hampshire, but is an overall trend that we see throughout the country. This also is not due to the charter schools taking a lot of students away from our schools. Because of economics and other factors, families are just not having as many children as we have in the past. This has resulted in many very small classes and the combining of grades in some of our smaller schools. The average age in the state of New Hampshire is also getting much higher, which has an effect on the type of families that we see. Safety. An item of increasing importance in our society today is school safety. And New Hampshire is not immune to this problem. We have minimum staff requirements for each of the small school buildings. As of yet, the security of our facilities and the lack of staff in some of the buildings has not proven to be a problem. As more security requirements are needed and mandated, it will become more and more expensive to add what is needed to so many older, smaller schools. This area should not and cannot be taken for granted. The safety of all of the people in our school buildings should be our top priority. Educational equity. It is very difficult to compare large schools and small schools by just looking at test scores. Because of the very small numbers in some of the grades, a few very high scores can warp percentages. When you have many more students, as the larger schools do, the scores tend to even out on the average. In some cases, students with significant needs cannot have those needs met in their smaller schools, and so they have to be moved to the larger schools to take advantage of the resources that are there. This can also affect test scores. The combining of grade levels does make it more difficult to teach appropriate grade curriculum. It also does not allow for grade level sharing by staff because there's only one staff at that grade level in the building. Sometimes coverage of needed responsibilities is difficult because there are so few staff members in the building. Some research talks about smaller classes and how smaller classes can benefit, but when they talk about that in the research, they're talking about classes of sizes from 12 to 15 and not from 7 to 10 students. The savings that has been estimated in the plan that many of you have read says that the savings will be between $2.4 million and $4 million with the closing of the schools. This may not seem like much when you divide it out amongst all the taxpayers in the district. What it does do is allow for an amount to offset some of the increases that we're seeing in the budget. Oil and electrical costs last year skyrocketed. Transportation and health costs this year have taken significant jumps. If these savings are not needed for some of these things, the money is returned to the taxpayers as it is at the end of every year currently. Excuse me. Some of this money also might be used for the different needs in the middle school and the high school. The concern for keeping so many smaller elementary schools is understandable, but the cost of not consolidating is keeping these upper level grades from getting the resources that they need. All of the K-4 students will eventually be in the middle school and the high school. And so we need to worry about what happens when they reach that point as well, not just during their elementary years. Lack of teachers. I know there's been a lot of talk about the fact that we have said that we will be dedicated to having no staff layoffs in this plan. We cannot actually fill a lot of the staff requirements that we currently have. We have teachers around the district that are taking on extra responsibilities because of our inability to hire teachers with the shortage that we see in New Hampshire. We support managing staff by attrition and retirement. And we fully expect that these things will happen as they're needed so that the staff layoffs will not be needed. A majority of the surveys did endorse paying teachers higher wages to keep our good teachers and to attract other teachers to our system. The staff is about 85% of our budget. Consolidating the small schools so that those staff members can have positions in other schools will help out with this situation. Lack of social opportunities for students. Children of all ages, especially younger ones, have a great need for social interaction. Underpopulated schools cannot provide this because of the few students at each grade level. And this includes diversity among students as they grow and mature. Some children feel ostracized from the limited numbers to choose from. Children also learn a great deal from interactions amongst each other. And in my many years in education, I've seen in classrooms how children learn almost as much from each other as they do from the staff. World languages. Part of this plan is that we will be looking at increasing our world language curriculum. We currently do not have world language programs in the middle school. While we do have them in the high school, they are limited, and this would give us a chance to expand those. The savings from consolidating can be also used to take care of both this problem and the possibility of increasing in some other curriculum areas. There's been a lot of talk about community impacts. We have considered, as you can see if you've read the Prismatic report, the impact on all the communities that this consolidation would have. The impacts, though, are multifaceted and are very hard to predict. There were comments on the surveys from people in Sharon who said that the impact for them when they did not have an elementary school was much less than people thought it was going to be. The idea of losing a social hub of the community can be offset with planning and looking at other ways to handle the activities that are now being held. Some of the school facilities, like the playgrounds, will actually be more available during the day when school is not in operation. The economic impact would depend upon what is actually done with the schools if the schools are closed. and I'll go into that in just a few minutes. As for the ability to attract new residents, research shows that the lack of an elementary school in town was not a significant factor as long as an educational facility was available, readily available, for children in that town. In this case, children will be in the same district with the same curriculum that they would have in the school that they're currently in. Basic educational programs. Basic educational programs can be more efficiently accomplished in single grade classrooms. There are some programs that suffer because of inability to hire or afford sufficient staff. Special education programs can be improved and possibly eliminate the need for sending children to other schools. A great amount of staff time is used traveling from one school to the next, staff time that could be used servicing children instead of driving. Speech, occupational therapy, and physical therapy staff are in great need, but lose significant time traveling from one school to the other. Before and after school activities are available at the higher grades, but cannot function at the smaller schools with so few students. These programs could be more efficiently run and less costly at the consolidated schools. And this is something that was in the plan for us to look at, is improving the before and after school programs in the schools. Nursing staff services would be more readily available with less schools. We currently are not able to have a nurse in every school. The statewide shortage of school nurses has also made this very difficult for us to accomplish. Those are the main things that came out in the Prismatic report as far as why we're looking at the plan. Now for planning ahead. We've been asked, well, where are the children going to be sent? In the Prismatic report, they identified 2 schools for each of the closing schools where the students would go. One of them is a larger school, and one of them is a more medium-sized school, giving parents more of a choice where to have their children go, depending on the size of the school they would like and where they live. Looking at detail, current enrollment, projected enrollment, and school capacity, all logical moves would seem to work. Based upon all the data, capacity is not going to be a problem. Remember, there's a whole school year allocated to detailed planning prior to the consolidation happening. As Alan had said, it's actually a year and a half, because after the March meeting, we would spend the rest of this year and all of next year planning before the consolidation actually occurred. What to do with the closed schools? The last thing that we want to do is just to maintain a closed building sitting there. Working with each town, we'd have many different options. We've already had a meeting with the selectmen from each of the 4 towns, and many options were discussed at that time. Originally, it was said that the towns would have the right of first refusal, but because of new laws that have been passed, my understanding is that the charter schools would have the first right to use the buildings. The buildings can be sold back to the town at less or fair market value if they want it. The town can use the building or sell or lease it to another party. thus putting it back on the tax rolls. Some options other communities have used for the buildings are a community center, an elderly service center, daycare, and workforce housing. There's a huge call for many of these services, and there are many grants available to provide for them. As I said before, charter or private schools are also a possibility, as is industrial use depending on the zoning in the towns. Right now, we do not have all the details. Much will be ironed out after the decision is made. Details will come in a snowballing effect where, as decisions are made, others will follow. That is why the rest of the school year in 2023-24 and next year, 24-25, would be dedicated to planning. The school year 25-26 would be the implementation year, and the school year 26-27 would be for review and fine-tuning of the plan. The board is dedicated to include affected community leaders and parents in planning these changes as much as possible. We wish to get feedback on things that the closing schools would like to see brought into their new schools so that they are not lost. We'll try to make this change as possible as we can for people by including them in the planning sessions. In closing, I'd like to share that during my tenure in Franklin, we faced similar financial crisis to what we have here. Our only choice there was to keep from laying off 20 teachers and having almost 30 students in an elementary school. Our only choice was to close one of the elementary schools and send part of the students to the other elementary school and part of the students to the middle school. The school that closed was actually the school that I attended kindergarten in. And it was the first year the building opened that I went to kindergarten there. And I also went there through my 6th grade years. So I understand how people feel when we talk about having a school close in their community. Yet the decision in Franklin had to be made for the best interests of all the students throughout every grade in the district, just as we feel as a board that that's the reason that we're looking at this plan, to make sure that all of the students are provided for throughout the entire district at every grade level. All students in your smaller schools will eventually be in the middle and high school. So we need to make sure that the programs in the middle and the high school are as well put together as we can. The one thing that I did learn from my time in Franklin when this happened is that a building does not make a school. The passion that staff, parents, and children have for their educational experience can occur no matter where that experience occurs. I want to thank you for listening to what we had to say, and at this point in time, we'll take questions.
Take questions from the in-house audience first, and then we will alternate and take questions from the online audience. So if there's anybody from the in-house audience that has a question, please come up to the microphone and state your question, and you have 2 minutes to do that. Please state your name and the town you come from too.
Sarah Kahn, Dublin. Can I ask more than one question as long as it doesn't go over 2 minutes? Or are we limited to one question?
No, you can do as many as you want in 2 minutes.
Perfect. So my first question is, at the January 9th meeting, it was represented that the board cannot start making a plan until we all vote in favor of this warrant change. And I'm just wondering what prevents you from making that plan first?
As far as making the plan itself, I mean, there is, the plan is, as far as the 4 schools is concerned. If you mean
Well-
the details, a lot of the details will have to be worked out as things go along.
So at the outset, it was represented that you are not necessarily going to be closing all 4 schools, just this gives you the option? But you're saying that the plan is definitely to close the 4 schools?
No,
No. What is the plan?
the plan is, we accepted the prismatic recommendation that the 4 schools close.
Okay.
Okay. The warrant article, as it states, says that 4, as Alan said, that 4 schools will remain open.
Right.
It doesn't say anything about,
Right, but if we vote in favor for this, we have no more say after that. Like, if the board decides, the board has the authority to shut down all 4 schools potentially.
that warrant article will be coming up, first of all, at the deliberative session, and then at the election day in March. So it's actually up to the people to decide.
So the
if that
deliberative
plan-
session is not where we vote on this. It's in March when we vote on this warrant change?
Yes. The deliberative session is just to finalize the wording of the warrant article, and then it will be voted on at the election in March.
March what?
15th, 12th.
At what time? All day. Okay. Where? Town hall. So in each respective town hall? Yeah. Okay. So the board cannot give any more of a plan, though. You can't tell us definitively what you're going to do with the 4 schools. You cannot make a plan for this. You don't know what the transportation costs. I just want to confirm all of this. And you cannot figure those things out until we vote in favor of this change.
Correct.
Until you vote in favor of giving us the authority to make the change.
But why can't the planning happen? I mean, Prismatic was able, under an RFP, to do some of the research, and they even say that there were limitations in the way that they were hired in their own report. Why can't the full planning be done before we have a vote on this? It feels like we're being asked to give a blank check, basically, vote without knowing exactly what we're voting for.
That's okay. No, Prismatic gave recommendations, okay? And what we're asking is that you vote on the recommendations, or vote on what we have said we would look at in the recommendations. We have to have a whole year to do the planning for the detail of how we're going to implement things. So we're asking you to give us the authority to bring in, to execute our recommendations at the end of the planning year. That's all.
But so we're wondering, I got the echo of other people wondering this in this room, why we can't get more of a comprehensive plan before we're asked to vote on this. I think that there are people here, myself included, who could be convinced to close at least some of the elementary schools, but we need more information. I know I asked a lot of questions in the January 9th meeting, and we were basically told, in fact, explicitly told, that you guys couldn't do this level of planning without us first voting on changing the warrant. And I'm just asking why. There's nothing in the warrant that prevents you from doing it.
Well, if we didn't, you're talking about if we did not vote this year on that and took the whole year for planning and then asked for a vote, because that would extend it. It would extend the time for implementation by another year.
Prismatic's own report says that we wouldn't, actualize any savings likely for at least 3 years.
We're not just talking about savings, we're talking about the educational opportunities for students.
But if we're not realizing the savings, where's the money gonna come from for those educational opportunities? I get the close the schools, you have more money for the other schools. But we're not there yet in the planning.
So the details, as he said, are going to be worked out because, for instance, as I said before, parents are going to have the option of the two schools that they can send their children to. And so a lot of the details, as far as transportation, as far as staff movement, as far, all those details, a lot of it is going to be dependent upon how the warrant article works out and decisions that are made at that point.
So even though this is the plan and this is the recommendation for Prismatic, there's no way to possibly do any kind of planning or assessment beyond what they have done without getting a yes vote on the warrant?
Janine?
So it isn't that we can't, like, give you a better idea, but without that linchpin article being changed, that gives us the authority and the permission to go ahead from our communities, we can't invest that kind of time into it. What we would have to do in order to give you a clearer picture of what it's gonna look like, we would have to ask the superintendent and the administrative staff to take everything else off the table and only work on this. It's a huge job. So what we're saying is, we have to get this permission in order to move forward. But we intend, like during that year, to work much more closely with all of our communities, giving you the opportunity to see what the other schools are like, giving you the opportunity to come in and meet the other families and the principals and the teachers, to talk about what the possibilities might be in your communities, how you might go forward. So there's a lot of that kind of work that has to be done, but as far as the more specific planning of what are the bus routes gonna look like, and what is it gonna look like if my child is here, what kind of services are gonna be available, that all has to be done once we have the permission from that article.
But there's nothing in the article that makes it that way. That's just how you're operating. Which I understand. I understand the reasons for it. I just want to make sure there's no requirement in the article or anywhere else that prevents you from doing this. Correct?
Time and money.
Time-consuming and expensive.
Fair enough. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Go to the online now.
Yeah, so Lisa, that question's from Lisa.
So we have a series of questions. First one, can you 100% guarantee that no teachers or staff will be terminated or laid off? And can you guarantee that the district will put in place the before and after school programs that are listed in the plan? Obviously, we can't 100% guarantee anything. I mean, that's what the planning period is set up for, is that's what we're planning on doing. But we have to look at a lot of different factors as we go into that planning period. But that's what our intention is. But like anything else, we cannot 100% guarantee anything. Has the board discussed what they will do if this warrant article does not pass? What we're looking at is, again, using that period, using the prismatic plan and all the information that we have to look at what different possibilities are. Has the board met with the towns to determine if they will buy the buildings back or not? We did have meetings with the selectmen from each of the 4 towns, and it was discussed at that point. Okay, sir?
Yep. Steve Chamberlain, Francistown. I have 2 children at Conval High School and 1 child at FES right now in 2nd grade, or 3rd grade, excuse me. My question is fairly basic. I'm concerned that the school board is making decisions with bad data. You had mentioned earlier that there's ongoing and projected declining enrollment, but were you aware in the prismatic report that on page 2.4 it actually shows an increase in the student population of 9%? It's page 2.4. It's projected to increase to 2015 staffing or student levels by 2031, projected. Correct.
So you are talking about the NESDEC report. It does show a small increase, but for all intents and purposes, based on our current population and our current staff, that would be a flat. We wouldn't need to add staffing. We wouldn't need to buy desks. There's not a. It's just not a significant increase in population.
Okay, so just to be clear, the position is that the continued voice track to our district is that the school population is decreasing, but yet the report that you've contracted shows that there's an increase. So just to be clear on that topic, is that correct? Yes or no? Because it was said again tonight.
So I have been here for 15 years. When I got here, there's almost 3,000 students. There's not even 2,000 students in our buildings. There has been a rapid and substantial decrease in school population over the last decade. We are all aware of that. The increase that you're talking about is nominal, and we are continuing to see decreases for a variety of reasons. Again, nothing would make me happier than having 70 children in every single building. And I've had that conversation. But the truth of the matter is, our population continues to not be school-aged population. We have people moving into the district who don't have children, and many of those are not people of childbearing years. We have students certainly moving in. They don't always come to our schools, and that's a choice. There are lots of programs that have started to take money away from public schools. I would love to see a room full of people so that I could explain those programs to people and what's happening. So there are a variety of reasons to believe that while there is a projected increase and an increase is I think that's a generous way to put it. Based on our population right now, that's just not the conversation. Even if we increased by 15 to 20%, which would also be great, it would really depend on where those increases happen. Our increases that we're seeing are really mostly in Antrim and Peterborough. So,
Could you
Okay.
just state who you are?
I'm Dr. Kimberly Rizzo Saunders. I'm the superintendent.
Yeah, I think that kind of transparency and honesty that you just displayed, I think would be helpful. If you're looking to try to get everybody in the district on the same side of the table on this, I would encourage you to be forthright about the data that you're using. Another example of this you mentioned, I know I've gone past 2 minutes and I apologize. Okay, I'll go back in line.
Do you have an online one?
You want to?
No online question. Did you want to finish Lisa's? No, there's not a new one. No.
We'll keep in house then. Please step up and state
Sorry, I
your
was-
name and
I
the
was-
town you're from.
I'm Rose Lowry. I'm from Temple, and I do not have children in school right now, and I actually did not have my children go through the Temple school system as elementary kids. There's a couple things that are very disturbing. I find it extremely, just profoundly disrespectful for you to say that these changes affect us all equally, because it does not. And there's just kind of like, I'm sorry, but it's lame data about, we have examples that taking elementary school does not change how people choose to reside in a town or not. And I just feel like that, it feels like that data has been cherry-picked to support a foregone conclusion about this. Like the data they're using, and we're talking about sending our little elementary kids on an hour bus ride to elementary school. Is that true in the data they use when they say that, that did not affect people's decision whether or not to live in a town? If someone comes to Temple and they hear that we don't have an elementary school and that their kids are going to have to ride a bus for 45 minutes to an hour to get to elementary school, they're not going to live there. We're not going to have little kids. We're not going to have young families. We're not going to have young people to support our historical society, volunteers. We're not going to have volunteers. We'll have nothing but retired people. The profound change in Temple that I have volunteered for the entire time I've lived here, there's nothing that could be a more profound change to our town and the character of our town. So it is not the same for all of us, how this will impact us. So I just want to make that very clear. And what we don't understand is why haven't we heard kind of more creative solutions? Give us our fifth graders back. Give us a kindergarten. Give us a preschool. We can have one middle school. I know we talked about this several years ago, and that went up for vote. I just don't feel, it feels like one decision was presented. It doesn't feel like we as voters have an opportunity to say, I would rather have this, or what about shuffling the grades in a different way? And to separate out, I'm, of course, very much in support of excellent quality education. I think I just heard a beep, for our older grades, but it also doesn't help to destroy the towns that feed those young children that would go to those higher grades.
Thank you.
Sean Foisey from Temple, and I can agree. We have 6 kids. We would not have moved to Temple had they not had an elementary school. So you can't say that it doesn't affect people's decisions. Next, this $2 to $4 million savings for the taxpayers, it's already been stated that that money is earmarked for other things. So where does the savings come from? What savings do the taxpayers get?
All right, 2 things. One is the different areas that I mentioned. I said research shows, okay? And when I say research shows, I'm sure that the research didn't say 100% of the time this is true, okay? What the research showed was that was what was true a majority of the time.
At the last meeting, it was already stated that the money has already been earmarked for all these other programs. So where's the tax savings? That's the question. And I know you said, but you're running around in circles because you're saying that you're going to get savings, but the money's already spent. You can't have both.
I think what we said was these are some options as far as what can be done with the money.
Yeah.
Okay, it can be used for improving programs. It can be used for offsetting some of the larger things that we're facing, or at the end of the year, it can be returned to the taxpayers.
My daughter graduated from Conval, valedictorian, hated the school. You did nothing for her. Most of her schooling that she did was online. She was taking summer classes and online classes during school because you couldn't challenge her, you couldn't give her anything, and she still did it and was refused the National Honor Society. Valedictorian. You failed her.
Did you want to take an online question first? We don't really have one. Oh, okay. So Steve Chamberlain, Francistown again. So you'd mentioned earlier that the test scores at some of the small schools could be skewed if there were, higher performing students in the school. It's also equally true, however, and wasn't mentioned, that the opposite is true statistically, that if there are lower performing students, that could drag down the scores. I'm curious why you chose to mention one and not the other.
Well, I did say that you shouldn't use test scores because of the possibility of them being skewed with the smaller class sizes.
Okay, so if Prismatic recommended test scores as a good way to provide apples to apples comparison across schools, that would be invalid?
It's one thing to look at, but what I said was you can't use just test scores to compare schools.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Hi, Laura Mafera from Francistown. My question is, why are we having this meeting with just these 4 towns that are going to be or possible recommended closures? Is it not important for the other towns to hear the concerns that the closing schools have to be able to make the right decisions, or their own decisions?
Our next meeting will be with all the towns.
Right, but so the other towns are probably, I'm guessing, not tuning in tonight because they know that this is for these 4 towns and they'll have a meeting later on.
No.
And,
Go on.
well, I mean, it specifically says that this meeting is for Francistown, Bennington, Dublin,
This
and
meeting
Temple.
was specifically set up for the 4 towns that in turn will be impacted by it, so everybody can get their voice heard.
Absolutely,
And that's
and
what
I
we're
understand that,
asking
and I'm saying, where we're trying to have our voices heard, I think these other towns are being not involved. They're not hearing our voices because it was not set up to be for all of the towns. It was set up
They
to be
are
for.
hearing your voices, they're all online.
But are they? I mean, how do we know that? I mean, it said that there were 4 towns. If I'm in Peterborough and I'm in Antrim, and it's a meeting for these 4 towns, I'm gonna wait my turn. Maybe I'm too kind, but I would wait my turn and attend the meeting that included my town. It just feels like that maybe not everyone's gonna get to hear the concerns that we have, because it was limited to just these 4 towns.
What we're trying to do is do this in small pieces so that everyone will have the opportunity to participate. Again, if we,
I don't, I mean, there's not a meeting for the 4 towns that aren't. There's 4 towns that are recommended closures, and then there's everybody.
and that meeting will occur on the 8th.
All right, thank you.
Hi there, Chris Gallant from Dublin. Quick anecdote to start this question. When my 9-year-old found out that his school in Dublin might possibly be closed, he went into like a little panic attack. And when my daughter, who's 6, also heard this, she also got very, very upset. They don't want their school to go anywhere. They like where they go to school, they like their teachers, they like their little community. Did Prismatics survey go into any kind of, analysis of what this will do to the small children who will be consolidated into other schools? Because you're talking about uprooting them from all that they know at this point in their school career to be sent somewhere else with different people, with different teachers, different landscapes. And were the kids actually considered in this, process?
We understand that the little children will have a problem with this. That's not an issue. But.
That's not an issue?
No, it's not an issue that we don't understand.
Ah.
We do understand that. But this is the only thing they have to base their issue on, is what they've seen now. They don't have any idea of what it's going to be like in another school.
Frankly, nor do you.
I'm sorry?
I said, frankly, nor do you. None of us do. You're just talking about the potential of even having the possibility of voting, of looking into this. I mean, nobody really knows what's going to be the ultimate effect for any of these
We
kids.
can only go into history of other towns and other districts that have done this. And the effect has always been positive if they've done it correctly. And we understand that there are some children that will have an issue with this, but little children that in turn haven't seen anything else will always have an issue with something like this. It depends on how their parents try and explain the thing to them.
Prismatic did several surveys with children throughout the district. And that's one of the reasons that the plan is mapped out the way that it is, that there'll be that 1.5 years of planning, meeting with parents, trying to see what we can do to make this as, quote, painless as possible. And then, after the 1.5 years of planning, will, when the implementation goes into effect, we'll be monitoring that implementation to see what problems might come up and what we can do about those problems. And then there's a follow-up year to look at, what has happened and how it's worked.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
1 second, Janine?
No.
Okay.
Alan, it's just, she can't, if somebody's saying they can't hear people, so I think that you should be heard. I think people at the microphone, if you could like speak up at the microphone. People at home, we have a complaint that they can't hear who's speaking, so if you could speak up, and Alan, if you could
Sure.
speak up, thank you.
To echo my neighbor Rose in Temple and also the other gentleman with the 6 children, when my family and I left the Boston metro area with our 5 children in October of 2020, the fact that Francistown had, my name is Elian Laramie, I'm from Francistown. The fact that Francistown had a school was a major deciding factor for us. My neighbor sitting up there, she has 2 young children. It was also a major deciding factor for her. Another neighbor on Main Street, it was a deciding factor for them. My question is that the warrant article will be changed so that it will say the school board may make changes to these 4 schools. Why isn't it all 8? Why should, and during the prismatic report, the woman said, we don't want the other 4 towns to feel like there could be any change. Why not? If we are giving the vote for you to possibly close our schools, why shouldn't you have the power to close those 4?
Those towns, the other 4 towns, do not have the population problem that these 4 towns do.
That doesn't matter.
It does matter.
It doesn't, no, because if you're going to have the power to make changes for 4 schools, you should have the power to make changes for all 8 of them, not just 4. Those towns should feel the same way that we do, as though that we are writing that blank check to let you make decisions when you won't give us any plans other than, look at the report, look at this, look at that. You've been talking yourself in circles and you won't give anyone concrete answers. Why doesn't the article state that you'd have the power for 8 schools instead of 4?
The specific wording of the warrant article says that elementary schools shall be in the 4 communities of Peterborough, Greenfield.
No.
Well, that's
Yeah.
what
No, the warrant article says that you may make changes to our 4 schools.
No, it doesn't.
No,
The warrant article just specifically states there shall be elementary schools in these 4 communities, period.
And that you may make changes to them.
No, it doesn't say anything more than,
It is implied. It's implied. It doesn't involve all 8 schools.
no. It's, Jim,
Let me make a couple. Jim Frederickson from Sharon.
Wait, get microphone.
Jim Frederickson from Sharon. Let me add a couple comments, but first of all, we're in this, we don't have any bone to pick with anybody. Some of you are getting pretty emotional, accusing us of not caring. We care. Okay, please, we do care. You're shaking your head, no, we do care. We take it all seriously. Okay? We're trying to do the best jobs we can. Now, in terms of the warrant article says, if it's passed, it says we shall maintain 4 schools, elementary schools in the 4 towns. The reason for that is the history of the Articles of Agreement. The current Articles of Agreement says they shall maintain schools in 8 towns. So how do we change that? We say, would you approve a warrant article that says let the board do what they want to do? No. So it's a little bit of a calculus, right? What will give us the opportunity to do what's best for the district as a whole? There's nothing that says we have to close the 4 schools. We can close 1, we can close 2, we can close 3, we can close 4. What the warrant article says, we can't close the other 4. If you want to change the warrant article, it says give us the authority to close all 8, give us that authority. We're not going to close 8 schools, you know that. So please, tone it down a little bit in your emotions. It's a little offensive.
Clarify what the warrant article says, because when we were at the meeting and it was voted on, what we all heard was that the warrant article was going to say that the 4 towns, sorry to jump in, just that it seems like we're talking around in circles a little bit. When we were at the board meeting where you voted on what the warrant articles would be, what we all heard was that the warrant article would be that there shall be the 4 towns, Peterborough.
You want me to read the warrant article? Oh, let me read it for you. The present language says that the Conval School District shall be responsible for grades 1 through 12 and kindergartens. Kindergartens were previously authorized by a vote of at an annual cooperative school district meeting. Grades 9 through 12 shall be educated at the centrally located high school in Peterborough. Shall be. Grades 5 through 8 may be educated at the schools in Antrim and Peterborough. And here's the key, the only part we're changing. Elementary schools shall be maintained in Antrim, Bennington, Dublin, Francistown, Greenfield, Hancock, Peterborough, and Temple. Shall be maintained. We want to change that key word to elementary schools shall be maintained in Antrim, Greenfield, Hancock, and Peterborough.
So
We have
what
to
we
keep-
heard at the school board meeting that was voted was that it was gonna be the 4 towns shall have the schools, and that the 4 Temple, Francistown, Bennington, and Dublin may have. That was the wording that we heard. It may not have changed.
There was a
Okay.
discussion,
Okay,
but the words in the warrant article that we proposed did not change.
okay,
So the warrant article as proposed, as it written right now, says shall maintain 4 schools in those 4 towns.
okay.
And
So
there was
the
a lot
whole
of
may
discussion
thing
about what
didn't
it
make
shall mean and may, and we have to close all 4.
Thank you.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Tim McGee from Francistown. My wife and I moved there in 2017 from Groton, Massachusetts, where we also went to a Tarbell Elementary School, very small one. It was closed as well, which was a net loss to the community. Pretty well-to-do community. Lots of taxes. We were transplanted here across the border. We saw a similarity in this community in Francistown to what we had in West Groton 40 years ago. It's definitely one reason, a huge reason why we chose Francistown, the school, and the way that that community is set up. And this is attractive to people migrating, and they're going to be migrating north. I see that there is a historical trend that you're looking at as far as population, but I don't think that that's too long term, honestly. I think that this part of the country is going to have migration from the west, from the south over the next 30 years, and up from the East Coast as well. My question is, your argument about the net benefits aren't all that convincing, let me say first. But it was sort of framed as the funding for these 4 schools, or for these small elementary schools, takes away what could be done for middle school, for high school, for things that could be, that the money could be used for. But can you explain what will be lost over the period of the next 10 years if these schools remain? Can they operate as is for the next 10, 20 years, or is there going to be some serious detriment to their functioning?
So what we are in, and I think, and I do not speak for the board, so would look to the board to kind of give me a, okay. Right now, where we are is, and I think the board's intent, again, I don't speak for the board, is to try to find out what the communities want. If the communities want the 8 small community schools, then that is a decision that they can communicate at the ballot. Am I on the, is this okay that I'm, and I sit in a lot of board meetings. If they want that, then they need to let us know. What we need to let you know, or I'm gonna let you know as an administrator, is over the last 10 years, we have, and I'm gonna tell you this is our brand new BA who came into my office the other day and said, you really are cutting at the high school and middle school in order to keep the small community schools open. And I said, yes, we are. We know, that is something that we are aware of. Because when there are only 5 teachers or 3 teachers or 1 or 2 classroom teachers, you can't cut any more staffing. You've got an assistant, somebody who acts as the principal. Sometimes they teach, sometimes they do interventions, sometimes they go coach at another building just to make sure that they have something to do on their other pieces. There's no one left. There's no more cutting there. There's nothing left to take. So we take from the only places we can. And over the last 10 years, we have eliminated French from the high school. We've eliminated multiple extended opportunities for students and replaced them with online learning. At the high school, we have cut AP classes at the high school. We have cut the entire world language program at the at the middle school. This is what we have done. In order to continue to have the programming that you have now, we will have to make cuts or we'll have to increase the budget. So there's kind of 3 choices. We either have to control spending by closing schools. We have to control spending by cutting program and staff, or we have to increase the budget. And communicating to us what you want is what the board is really looking for you to do. So I'm going to tell you that this year, just in our budget, we are making some significant cuts because of declining enrollment, but some to try and balance the budget. The budget is up 4%. A lot of that is in costs we don't have control over. But every year, the board looks at me and says, make it work. And what I'm telling you, as someone who's been here for 15 years, I don't know how to make it work anymore. Something's got to give, or we're going to have increases in the budget. I love our community. I love our schools. I love all the community schools. I love going to Francistown and seeing them outside. I love going to Greenfield and seeing what they're doing there. They're lovely schools. You have to communicate what you want. If you want the community schools, then vote the warrant article down. Sorry. If I went outside my...
No? We have an online question. With the November 2023 ruling of Conval School District versus the state of New Hampshire in favor of Conval and other plaintiffs, has this outcome been considered as part of the school board's majority decision to pursue the prismatic recommendations? If so, what does the school board foresee with this outcome, and what influence will it have on the recommendations made? So I will tell you, in Franklin, I was part of the original Claremont lawsuit, and it was years before we actually saw anything at all from that, because the state of New Hampshire immediately appealed the decision, and it went through the courts and through the courts and through the courts, and eventually the legislature just didn't pay. So, but I'm sure that superintendent can.
You want me to talk about advocacy? All day long. So this is where we are with the lawsuit right now. The Judge Ruoff said that minimally adequacy would have to be about $7,300. Just to give you an idea, that means $6 million for our community, just like right off, that's without any what's called targeted aid for students that have IEPs or et cetera, et cetera. We're probably talking about another $10 million. With that said, there is legislation right now, 1586, that says $10,000 a student as adequacy. That would be a huge, huge help for us. We are waiting to hear. The state has asked Judge Ruoff to stay some of his decisions. And so that's the first step. And then the next step is that they can appeal to the state Supreme Court. We are still probably talking 2 to 3 years out from a final decision. We are hoping that the legislature makes or does their job in the meantime.
Yes, sir.
I'm Jonathan Morgan from Dublin. I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old who will be attending kindergarten at Dublin Consolidated next year, and hopefully the 2-year-old as well. I have a question about sort of the process. So the way you just framed it was that if the warrant article doesn't pass, then this discussion's over, the elementary schools will stay open. But earlier, like one of the online questions was asking what happens if it doesn't pass. You sort of said like, oh, well, we'll continue the planning process. So like what happens if in March you hear from the communities, we vote the warrant article down? Are we back here the next year? Are we back here in 2 years? Like, what's the process from there?
What's going to happen? Is that better? What's going to happen is if it's voted down, we'll still take the next year to do planning on what we can do. And then we will ask for another vote.
What will that vote?
I'm sorry?
I mean, so the way you phrase that makes me think that if we vote it down, you're going to do it. If it passes, the same thing's happening.
Dick?
I'm unclear here.
Sure. Let me grab that.
I'm Dick Dunning from Peterborough Rep and the Board Chair. I think to answer your question really hinges on what the vote tells us. If we get a strong indication that the communities want to keep their little schools open, then we need to plan on how we're going to do that. As the superintendent explained to you, there are 3 options.
Yeah, I understand.
And so we're going to have to decide, how do we address what the taxpayers told us they want us to do? And that's not an easy thing to decide. So I think to say we're going to come back and ask you the same thing a year from now is not really what we should be talking about. It's what are we going to do from what you tell us you want us to do, and bring that plan to you and say, whatever the vote said. The vote said, keep the schools open, so here's how we're going to make that work for you as taxpayers. Understand, we may have to have reduction in force. We may have to say your tax rates are going to go up. And those are the things that we're faced with. We faced almost a 10% increase in the tax rate here in Peterborough. You know, how long will the taxpayers be able to carry that burden? The greatest concern I have, and I've been here for a long time, as some say I'm older than dirt, if we take a budget cut, the impact it would have on the district would be dramatic. And when I've had experience on that when I was here as an administrator, when we had a budget cut of $100,000 20 years ago. It took us 10 years to recover from that. There was a lot of programs that were lost. So we don't want to lose programs. We want to know what the taxpayers want us to do, because what we hear is we can't keep paying the tax bills that we're getting. So we're trying to find a way to address that. So tell us what you'd like us to do, and then we'll come back with, here's how we think we can address that. To say we're going to come back here a year from now and say we're going to close schools, I don't know if we can answer that until we know what you want us to do.
So if the warrant passes, or will there also be another vote in a year on the plan? Or will it be a plan? and
It'll be,
it's
the
gonna
board,
be
the
enacted?
board will just come forward and say, here's our plan. I don't think that is going to require a vote, because you've already given us permission to do that.
Okay. Just wanted to be clear.
You're welcome, thank you.
And that leads to one of the online questions, which is, if voted yes to consolidation, who will be creating the detailed plan? Will it be an outside vendor? How strict is the timeline? So, again, we have said that we'll spend the next half of the year and a year planning, and that will be done by the school board, possibly a committee from the school board, in conjunction with administration, staff, and parents. We want to try to have the parents as much involved as possible as far as the changes go in the schools. But it will be an internal thing.
Hi, thank you. I'm Robert Wills from Temple. I grew up in Australia, but I love the history of New England, and I'm a student of that. I'm also chair of the Temple Energy Committee, and even though the focus has been on staff costs, surely the energy costs of running buildings of this nature are significant, and these are getting to be quite old buildings. So also there's a lot of grant money available through Inflation Reduction and other grants. We could probably get to the point where Temple Elementary had 0 utility costs. We have land available. We could do photovoltaics. We could electrify the buildings. We could improve the weatherization, the insulation, and so on. So a question is there any work on reducing energy costs? Have there been any energy audits? Can the school board share the current energy costs and breakdown, monthly fuel, electric and fuel costs for our schools? And can we look at them, and can we look at grants where we could maybe reduce our costs by 10% by just doing some smart energy work? Yeah. Go. Thank you.
Well, Tim's right there, and I keep going, come on down, yes, yes.
Yeah,
So
I think-
we have done actually some significant work over the last,
Yeah.
right? No, come on down, yeah.
Yeah. I think I've spoken to Tim in the past. Yeah.
So we have done some significant work, particularly over the last decade, and we have utilized both grants as well as other outside sources in order to do that. I'm going to let, our biggest project has obviously been our LED lighting and the solar panels on the high school.
Right.
But
Thanks.
Overall, I'm Tim Grassi, I'm the Director of Facilities, I live in Peterborough. Overall, looking at all 11 buildings, LED lighting was one of the biggest upgrades we've done. All of Temple Elementary School's LED lighting. Building automation, on-off times. Just the efficiencies of the equipment that we're running. Oil, individually for the buildings, I don't remember all of them. I know when I came here, our average was about 186,000 gallons of fuel oil a year. We're down about 120,000 now. So it's been 63,000 gallons of fuel oil is what we've saved. It's more than just buildings. Buses, we use propane buses now. Pay about $1.20 a gallon for propane rather than $4 and 30 cents a gallon for diesel. So a lot of money invested, reaped a lot of benefits. Unfortunately, energy costs have skyrocketed, as mentioned before. We do control the consumptions the best we can, and I think we do a pretty good job at it. But we should talk
Yeah.
a little later on.
Well, I think in some ways the towns are disenfranchised because the buildings are not owned by the towns. It's not our responsibility to improve their energy efficiency. But I think through our school board, we could say, we really want this. And if we could see a 5% reduction in costs, that's a lot of money. One other point is, I think there's a bit of a myth being propagated about large classes are better. One of my sons went to Conval and one went to Dublin, and he benefited from amazing small classes, 5 people and whatever, in specific topics. And I point out that years ago, Temple had, I think, 5 single-room schoolhouses. And I don't think people in that era complained about the education that the kids were getting. Thanks.
Really, Dick just answered that. Go ahead.
Please come.
Hi, I'm Susan Peters from Dublin. Just a couple of quick comments and a question. I'm on the select board and I did attend the meeting a few weeks ago, and I raised the point there. Well, our community is very concerned about this. As you've heard, our monthly payment to Conval has gone up $80,000 beginning in December. And so the biggest percentage increase of any town, the 9 towns in the district. At the same time, we're being told that our school may be closed. It's very scary for people to be thinking about that in terms of the money and the potential loss. Also, at that meeting, I don't think, we may have touched on it a little bit, but we really didn't flesh out at all what might happen to those 4 elementary schools. That conversation hasn't happened yet. But my question is, so the deliberative session is February 6th, but the next meeting, the meeting with all the towns, is February 8th. I think those dates are the dates you've given. And yet, at the February 6th deliberative session, there's potentially going to be the opportunity to amend the warrant article. I know it can't be amended to change the purpose or whatever, but how are these other 4 towns, point was well made, going to be ready for the deliberative session on February 6th and to be able to participate in that effectively when they haven't been to any of these meetings and the meeting with them isn't until the 8th? Thank you.
Chris Gallant, Dublin. So my wife and I, oh, sorry. My bad.
We're at a finite amount of time to turn have these meetings. And the sequence of them is something that we just had to do. And the other towns have had the opportunity to talk. They've been at the first meeting we've had. And now it's only the 4 towns, but the other towns have had an opportunity to listen, to understand what we're doing. And it's just a sequencing that has to happen because of not only the deliberative session, but because of the vote that's coming on in March and the time available.
Alan, just want to keep track of the time. It's 8:55, just so you said 9, so.
Yep.
I'll try and be brief. My wife and I moved here from Los Angeles to New Hampshire, and deciding Dublin was definitely boiling down to the school district and what elementary schools were available to us. Even purchasing our house specifically, we live right next to the consolidated school. Definitely was a huge factor for us. But you mentioned earlier that there is the potential that if our school gets closed, that a charter school could then move in. And what would the impact of there being a charter school there have on any of the other schools that were consolidated into?
I don't think I can answer that right now because we don't know what the charter school is, what its capacity is going to be, or anything like that, or if there even will be a charter school.
Right.
That's what we'd have this whole year of planning for, is to figure this stuff out.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Do you need any more questions?
We
Yeah, I'm trying to find the question.
Yeah, it says, did you help us? Basically, it's a statement. It's a statement more than questions.
Okay.
You want me to read it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
Well, a person from Peterborough who is a real estate agent says, for over 10 years, never has someone said to me, I don't want to move to a town because they don't have their own elementary school. Buyers have told me they want affordable housing and they want to be close to work.
We have time for one more question.
Hi, my name is John Manley, and I'm from Bennington. To answer that comment you just made, I rode home from a meeting last night with a young parent from Bennington who says that if this passes, they need to sell their house right away. 3 children. And the reason that he says that is because he believes that his property values are going to go way down because people do, in fact, look at where the schools are when they buy into a community. But the question that I have, Mr. Hoyt, is earlier on you said that that charter schools would have a preference over a town in what's going to go on with the school later, if the town wanted to buy it, although I can't imagine many would because of the fact that maintaining such a building is going to be more expensive than most of the small towns can deal with. But so why do charter schools have a preference?
Because it's now a rule that the State Board of Education has passed that says that charter schools will be given the first preference if there's an empty building in the community.
Just real quick, why was pre-K students added into the prismatic on the 4 schools that are not being closed? And secondly, you keep saying when our schools are closed instead of if. Well, I'm sorry, but they said one more question, so that's. But it was his. We're done, Alan.
We're done.
It was his.
Alan, as a member of the board, myself, I respectfully ask that you indulge me and allow this lady to ask her question.
Please, better make it a good question.
Fine.
I will say that my husband and I moved to Temple because of the Temple Elementary School. We wanted a town that had small classes in grade school. We wanted a big high school. We wanted to have lots of choices for our kids in high school, something small, and that was through grade 6. It was 1st through 6th, and that was what we bought into. It took us 5 years to raise a child to be the age that he could go to school there, and then the school just exploded. It was so big that we did not send our child to school there because it was too big. We kept our children in private school until they came to Conval, and they did get that big school experience that we wanted them to have. But we did not want them to have a big school experience in 1st through 6th grade. So that's why we chose Temple. I guess I was wondering, have you given adequate consideration to the fact that the middle school students, the 7th and 8th grade would easily fit into the high school, and the 5th and 6th graders would easily fit into the grade schools?
Yes, that has been considered. The downside of that is the opportunities 5th and 6th graders have now would not be available because, again, you would not be able to afford the staffing to continue with athletics, with band, chorus, you just couldn't put that amount of staff personnel throughout the district to continue those programs. So, so yes, it was considered, but financially, what would end up is those students would lose out because you wouldn't be able to afford to continue staffing the schools to meet those needs. So yes, we did.
All right. Thank you all very much for coming tonight. Oh.
This is a real easy question. I don't need to spend any time speaking, but I would like to hear from each and every one of you board members really quickly what you have heard from your townspeople throughout this process. Because I've sat through the last 4 meetings here and I know what I've heard, but I don't feel like this board is listening. So if each of you could just take less than 2 minutes, 1 minute each, and tell me what you have heard from your people, or from anybody in this room or previous room.
What we've heard from all of you is your concern about,
Have heard. Not everybody. I want to hear it from each individually, because everybody's got a different opinion, Dave.
I'm answering your
Well,
question.
you said we. Speak for yourself.
I am speaking for myself.
Okay.
When I say we, I'm part of that group. What I've heard from all of you is your love for your small school, your love for keeping it open. And what can we do to make that happen? And for me to make a decision, I need to know what all the taxpayers in the Conval School District want us to do. Because what I hear is that some people can't afford to live where they live because of taxes. If I'm going to answer to those people, I need to be able to give them an answer to say, the majority of the people in the Conval School District want to pay what it takes to keep the small schools open. That's my answer.
Thank you.
Dan Harper, Hancock. Obviously, it's a little awkward for me, Hancock, a small school, being open. We're centrally located, and what I've heard from residents, they understand. We have a central location. That's why we have pre-K. It's easier for other schools, other parents to drive, take the bus to us. We have 70, 80 students, and the residents, quite frankly, haven't said that much to me. Admittedly, if it was being closed, I'm sure I'd hear from them, but right now, they're accepting of it. They're looking forward to the diversity of other towns coming in. They have space, and that's what I can tell you I'm hearing from Hancock. It hasn't been a lot of feedback, but they are aware of it, I can tell you that. It's not like they don't know about the meetings. It's not like they haven't attended. It's not like they don't read the paper. They're aware. I attend PTL meetings. I meet with selectmen. They know what's going on.
Jim Frederickson from Sharon. Basically, the input I get from people is thank you for doing a thankless job. We don't have a small school in our town, but people in our town have been in similar situations and had kids in big schools, large schools, small schools. Our kids, we've moved, my wife and I both each independently moved 20 times in our lives. So we're in a different situation, but we do take your input seriously, personally, and I understand your emotions. And we have not, I can speak for myself, my decision has not been made. But one thing I did support was putting the opportunity to give all the voters an opportunity to weigh in this. I'm emphatic about that. I thought having this warrant article to give the full district an opportunity to vote on this is the way to go. If it requires 2/3 majority to pass. I'm holding up 3 fingers, I meant 2, right?
Thank you.
Janine Lesser, Peterborough. What I've heard from my neighbors and from the people I've talked to, if it's people with children in PES and SMS, they are very happy with their school, their children, and the classes and the size of their classes. They feel the same way about their schools as you feel about yours. So, and obviously those are the bigger classes and the bigger school. And the people my age that are older can see the need to reduce the size of our capacity. They absolutely see that need because of the taxes.
I'm William Breich. I'm from Antrim. I am a member of the board. I've heard nothing from my constituents. So in the absence of their wisdom, I've had to rely upon mine. And mine has been consistently opposed to closing the smaller schools. And why? Why? Because we can only imagine the effect on the economies, on the spirit, and I emphasize that. There are some things in life you can't put in dollars and cents, and it's the sense of community that grows out of having your own school. I am a product of public schools all the way back. Granted, I went to school in New York State, small town in this district, by closing their small school. If you, the people, and I don't mean to say you, but if the people tell us we want to keep everything open, then by God, we have to find a way of doing that. Do I enjoy paying taxes? Absolutely not. But we have to preserve our community, our sense of community. Otherwise, we just live in a kind of bland anonymity. I would not have that. It is not one of the reasons why I came to this state. It is blessed with a unique sense of community. I would like to do my little bit to help preserve it here. And candidly, at other times I have gone about door to door knocking on them and asking people. And yes, I've heard a number of older folks say to me that they're afraid of being taxed out of their homes. And that moves me more deeply than I can say. But I still stand by what I said when I first stood up and started talking. And I will continue to do so. And if my constituents disagree with me, they can always retire me from office. But until then, and one last point, and I want to make this very, very clear. I have been in these meetings of the school board. I'm a pretty fair attendee. My colleagues are dealing with the public in complete good faith. I make that point to you. We are dealing with honest men and women. That said, I passionately believe they are mistaken. In complete good faith. I respect them. They're careful. They care. But even people who do care can be mistaken. I hope that you will join me in voting no on this proposal when it comes before us later in the year.
Pretty much I can echo the same thing that everyone else has said, depending on the age of the people who have been talking to me and whether or not they have kids in school. I know the selectmen and the town administrator are drastically opposed to this in Bennington. Most of the older people who don't have kids in school are very worried about what happens with the budget and, you know, how long is this going to keep going on? And they see the need that something has to be done. And as I said, the people who have kids in school feel the same way that you do. So, especially in Bennington, because, you know, the question that I've got is, why was Bennington picked instead of some other schools? Truthfully, many of them think that the real small schools should be closed, but they don't understand why Bennington was picked.
I think as you know,
Pardon me? Right. I mean, what I'm saying is, people don't understand that. And we've talked about it.
Similarity of population between Bennington and Hancock specifically.
Right.
Yeah, but they did that on purpose. Put preschool in Hancock on purpose. Can we put, one more to go here?
All right, I think, oh, go ahead.
okay, I'll go now, close this out, is that, I think as you know, Chris, I've listened a lot to the town as to what the town has been saying, and I understand what they're saying, is that they don't want to lose their school, but I think once they get all the facts, they will in turn understand. Nobody wants to lose a school, but we have to deal with the reality of the situation. And I've been working with the people in the town to in turn understand what their feelings are. And the reality of the situation is that we cannot afford to keep all the 8 schools open. Now, what do we do with them? That's what this year of planning is for, is to work through how we're gonna deal with these things. It's as simple as it is. I understand what the town wants. And I am a member of the town, and I support what the town wants. And I will listen to them. There are some people in the town that say yes for consolidation, some people in the town that say no. And now, as we get more facts out there, more information out there, then it will coalesce into basically one major answer from our town. Okay? Thank you.
So can I just say the one thing I hear, select board member, sitting in these meetings and from our townspeople, the one thing that I hear is that the process is incomplete and the vote's premature. It's the one thing I hear. This isn't a race, and I don't know why you're making it one. I do know, I got a good idea why, and I'm not gonna get into that here tonight. I'm not here to fight, but the process, everybody feels is incomplete, the research is incomplete, and the vote is premature, and it's astonishing to me that none of you have said that. Because everybody I've listened to speak has said almost that. Every phone call I field, which is, I think, probably more phone calls than you, Alan, tells me that. And I've told you that 4 times individually.
All right.
Okay.
All right, we want to
Okay, we're
thank
gonna-
everyone for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.